So we've talked a lot here about how parents should be engaged in the technology habits of kids. But what about for teens? There's a number of litigation things that are kind of in play right now. But a new recent study actually says that young people, especially teens and young adults, really want their parents to know what they're doing, especially in terms of using technology to follow them and to track them. It sounds almost a little bit too good to be true, that this is how young adults feel. And we're going to discuss that next on the Celebrate Kids podcast.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So Dr. Kathy, tens of millions of teens actively want their parents to track their locations using tech resources like Apple's Find My and other third-party apps like Life 360. That's according to a new survey that I read about in the New York Times. More broadly, the survey goes on to report how Gen Z, those representing ages kind of 11 to 26 right now, they are the most anxious generation, more than previous generations. They have a different mindset to location tracking. Now, the Wall Street Journal kind of reported on this as well and says that, quote, every generation experiences its set of traumas, but social media and real-time news with vivid images about the pandemic and war and other disasters have heightened these anxieties among young people. And lots of them are closer to their parents than previous generations have been, end quote. They found that 87% of Gen Z respondents said that they use the tracking technology for long distance driving. 80% also went on to say that when they use this tracking technology when visiting new and dangerous places. 77% went on to say that whenever they go to a concert or an event or a festival, they want their parents to track them. And 78% went on to say that when they go to a party or a date or anything like that, they want parents tracking them. What's kind of surprising, though, is that 72% of Gen Z women believe their physical well-being benefits from location tracking. And then 94% of Gen Z respondents in this survey say that their life benefits from location tracking in general, likely due in part to them having grown up with it from an early age. Now, I think this report is kind of encouraging for parents. I'm just going to say it. What do you take away from it?
First of all, I've got to say I was fascinated when you shared this with me. I'm a little bit surprised. One of the things I take away is that young people today know that the world is a dangerous place, and that makes me sad. You know, I wish, frankly, that it was like when I was a kid where this never would have needed to be invented because it wasn't an issue for most of us. There was still evil happening around the corner, but for most of us, that wasn't the case. So on one hand, I'm sad that it's necessary. On the other hand, yeah, I think parents should be encouraged that these young adults are saying, I still care that you care. And I still would come to you if I need you. If I'm lost, if I'm frightened, you would be my phone call. I think that should encourage every parent.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's kind of a call maybe to parents to realize that it's not just kids kind of out there exploring and finding out who they are, right? In some ways, I think sometimes as parents, we might think that it's kind of Lord of the Flies. The kids are out there and now they're going to kind of grow and develop and kind of mature on their own. And I think this report really kind of shows that kids really have a hard need for security, especially as they're kind of building their identity, right? What would you say to parents or to different people who work with kids about this kind of survey, especially as we think about it kind of in the light of what social media and technology kind of is to kids? You know, sometimes we look at it and say kids don't want boundaries set or they don't want parents knowing what's happening with their technology. Is this kind of something that we should kind of step into now, knowing that there's this data, even if kids kind of push back at first? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, two major thoughts. One is that if your children come to you and want you to use Life 360 or, you know, Apple's Find My or whatever might be the family's thing, you know, I think there's a conversation to be had there. Who are you afraid of? Or is there a specific situation you have ever found yourself in that makes you believe that you're going to need this? Is somebody following you? You know, I think those discussions need to happen for the kids who are away at college, at work, or still living at home. Why do you believe that this will be necessary? Is there any particular issue that has come up that makes this necessary. I would have those conversations. The second conversations will be about boundaries. Boundaries are blessings when love is the goal. Absolutely. Look at scripture. Boundaries are blessings when it's because of love. It doesn't mean that we're, thought of it being so stupid, we're going to get into trouble. It has to do with protection, which is a part of love and guidance. And so I would say to parents who are listening to us today, Wayne, if you have never provided boundaries, if you allowed your 5-year-old to eat whatever he wanted to eat, you allowed your 8-year-old to go to bed whenever she wanted to, you're in trouble now because you've demonstrated that boundaries are not a part of your parenting. So I think if you've parented with boundaries that are appropriate of bedtime and eating, and we do our homework here, and this is, et cetera, then they shouldn't balk at this. It's a part of a parent-child relationship done well.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I want to kind of close by asking you something that I kind of alluded to before. That idea that oftentimes I think as parents, when we're helping our kids or guiding our kids to kind of navigate the world, there's maybe a sense that we kind of allow them to form or build an understanding of who they are and how they're kind of called to engage in the world, sometimes kind of on their own in some ways. We kind of give them a little bit of guidance and kind of push them a little bit, but there's something to really kind of mentoring them and walking alongside of them. And I think that this report kind of shows that kind of kids want that. They want their parents to know where they are, almost as like kind of waypoints along the map of their maturity and development. I might be taking this report to an extreme, but that's the encouragement that I kind of find here is that kids want us to know where they are physically. Does that also mean that maybe they want us to know where they are in their identity as they're growing and developing and maturing? Could we kind of extrapolate that out? And that kind of leads me to this question. Do kids really need people like us or adults or different people to kind of be involved in their journey on building an identity? Or is that something that we kind of need to give them space to do and maybe don't even necessarily need to maybe kind of chart in the traditional sense, but kind of let them kind of go out and explore it? Is our involvement really important in that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whether or not these young people are asking for our involvement in other ways because they've asked for it with tracking, I don't know. But I would take advantage of that. I would say, again, I think that if children want us to know where they are, then they're trusting us to rescue them in a time of need, to be their protection. So let's assume that they look at us in that way 24/7. And that would mean, hey, who did you sit with at lunch today? Hey, did you notice anybody lonely on the playground? And if so, what did you do about it? Hey, I noticed you having a side conversation during a church yesterday. What was that about? Was that gossip or was that, relevant ideas related to what you were hearing from the pulpit? I mean, I think, when we look like we care and we're invested and involved, then they're going to know that we are, and hopefully they'll want us to continue in those roles. It's fascinating.
As Dr. Kathy was talking here today, it reminded me of a passage out of 1 Timothy, and I'm going to begin reading it, chapter 5. Do not rebuke an older man harshly, but exhort him as if he were your father. Treat younger men as brothers, and older women as mothers, and younger women as sisters, with absolute purity. I love how Paul kind of encourages Timothy throughout the whole book of Timothy to really care for the church and those around him with a special level of understanding. And I think that's what this discussion today kind of hopefully illuminated for you, that young people right now, more than ever maybe, are craving involvement and community. And many times as older people, we can kind of just look beyond that and not really consider the plight of a young adult or even a teen in our midst. We kind of think that they don't want us around or kind of have it all figured out or don't necessarily want us following where they're going. But I think what we're finding in the world, and I think what we also find here in Scripture, is that God's call for us in this cultural moment is to be a part of their lives. And so we hope that this podcast has encouraged you to do that. Go find a young adult in your church or connect to your kid in kind of special and meaningful ways. Because what we're seeing right now from the data is that young people want us to do that. And we think being involved in their lives, and especially asking them how they're doing and kind of following up on different things that are happening, well, that's going to be a bright light that's going to cut through the darkness and uncertainty that they might be experiencing, but they never tell us about. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast in this our daily segment, Face in the Dark. It's been a great week with you here. And on behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, we're really looking forward to spending next week with you again. We'll see you then.